You wake up when your body is ready. No alarm, no schedule, no place you need to be. For 99% of human history, this wasn't a hypothetical. This was every single morning for roughly 300,000 years. Today, the average person works over 40 hours a week. Add the commute. Add the emails answered in bed before breakfast. Somewhere along the way, being constantly busy became the default setting of being human. But was it always like this? What if the story you've been told about your ancestors, endlessly toiling just to stay alive, is mostly wrong? In 1963, anthropologist Richard Lee traveled to the Kalahari Desert in southern Africa to live among the Jews/hoansi, a hunter-gatherer people whose way of life had changed little for thousands of years. He didn't guess at how they spent their days. He measured it hour by hour, task by task. What he found stunned him. Adults spent roughly 15 to 20 hours a week securing food. Not 40. Not 60. 15 to 20. The remaining waking hours went to rest, childcare, tool repair, visiting, and simply doing nothing at all. Compare that to your work week. Compare that to the last time you had an entire uninterrupted afternoon with nowhere to be. Decades later, anthropologist James Suzman continued that same line of research, living with Jew/hoansi communities and studying how their relationship to time and labor had survived into the modern era. His conclusion went even further than Lee's. Early humans, he argued, weren't scraping by. In terms of hours spent working versus hours spent free, many hunter-gatherer societies came out ahead of the industrialized world you live in right now. This idea has a name: the original affluent society. Not affluent in the sense of owning more things. Affluent in the sense of owning more time. A kind of wealth that doesn't show up on a bank statement, but shapes almost everything about how a life feels day to day. So what did people do with that time if not work? They talked. And the way they talked changed depending on the hour. Anthropologist Polly Wiessner spent years recording conversations among the Jew/hoansi to find out exactly what filled those free hours. During the day, she found most conversation was practical. Complaints about a bad hunt. Logistics about who was gathering where. Small conflicts quickly resolved. But at night, gathered around the fire, the entire tone shifted. In Wiessner's recordings, more than 80% of nighttime conversation was storytelling. Myths about how the world began. Histories of ancestors long dead. Jokes about people who weren't there to defend themselves. Legends about animals that could talk. Tricksters who outsmarted the powerful. And warnings wrapped inside entertainment. Why would this matter for survival? Because a story remembered at night became knowledge carried for years. It taught children which plants were poison without anyone having to nearly die to find out. It built trust between people who might have to share their last piece of meat with each other by the following week. Firelight, in a very real sense, turned strangers into a tribe. Let's reconstruct a single day. You wake with the sun, not before it. There's no reason to rush into darkness. The camp stirs slowly around you. Someone stokes yesterday's coals back into flame. Someone else checks a trap set the evening before, more out of habit than urgency. By mid-morning, a small group sets out to gather. Roots pulled carefully from dry soil. Berries, if the season allows them. Termites or grubs, protein sources many outsiders would overlook entirely. This isn't a desperate scramble against starvation. It's closer to a familiar walk with a purpose. One your body has done 1,000 times before and knows almost without thinking.
The hunters may leave in a different direction, sometimes walking for hours, tracking an animal not through speed but through patience and reading signs most modern eyes would miss entirely. A bent blade of grass, a scent carried on the wind, a print pressed just deep enough to tell you how recently it was made. A single hunt might take an entire day. It might end with nothing to show for it. That outcome is normal, expected, and survivable. By afternoon, most of the group has returned. Whatever food comes back is shared, not hoarded by whoever found it. This isn't generosity for its own sake, though it may look that way from the outside. Sharing meat across a band functions as a kind of insurance system. If your hunt fails today, someone else's success feeds you tonight. Next week, the roles might reverse completely, and no one keeps score. The hottest hours of the day are often spent resting in shade, conserving energy for the cooler hours ahead. This isn't laziness. Working straight through midday heat in an environment like the Kalahari would waste calories the body desperately needs later. And calories, in this world, are the only currency that matters. And then the sun drops, the fire is lit, and the stories begin. Not scheduled entertainment. Just what people naturally do when the work of the day is finished and the dark presses in around the light. Here's the counterintuitive twist. Somewhere around 10 to 12,000 years ago, a shift happened that almost everyone assumes was pure progress: agriculture. Humans began planting crops deliberately, domesticating animals, and settling permanently in one place instead of following food across the seasons. You'd expect that shift to mean more free time, more stability, less struggle against nature. The evidence suggests almost the opposite happened. Farming demanded near constant labor, from clearing land to planting, weeding, and harvesting on a strict seasonal clock nature didn't allow anyone to negotiate with. Storing surplus grain meant creating something new worth stealing, which meant new walls, new weapons, and new conflicts over land that had never mattered before. Diets that once included dozens of wild plants and animals narrowed down to a handful of staple crops, dependent on whatever grew well in that one patch of soil. Skeletal remains from early farming settlements tell the physical story plainly. Compared to the hunter-gatherers who came before them, early farmers were shorter on average, showed more evidence of tooth decay from starch-heavy diets, and carried more signs of chronic disease and malnutrition. The advance credited with building civilization may have made daily, individual life measurably harder for the people actually living through it. So why did agriculture win, if it made things worse for individuals? Because farmland could feed far more people per acre than foraging ever could, even if each of those people worked longer hours and lived a rougher life than their ancestors had. Populations exploded. Once that happened, there was no practical way back to 15-hour work weeks and campfire storytelling for everyone. Children in these bands weren't spared from this rhythm, but they weren't rushed through it either. There was no equivalent of a school bell or a homework deadline. Kids learned to track animals, identify plants, and read weather by watching adults do it in real conditions, absorbing decades of accumulated survival knowledge through imitation and play rather than instruction. Anthropologists studying similar foraging societies have consistently noted something modern parents rarely get to witness: children with enormous amounts of unsupervised free time, and adults who treated that time as valuable, not wasted. Sickness and injury existed, of course. Life wasn't gentle simply because it was slower. But the constant background hum of modern stress, the kind tied to deadlines, notifications, and financial obligations stretching years into the future, had no real equivalent. Worry, when it came, was usually about something immediate and solvable within days, not a mortgage payment due in 12 years or a performance review shaping a career decades away. Does any of this sound familiar? Look honestly at your own week. The alarm you didn't choose and can't turn off. A job that measures your worth in hours logged rather than problems actually solved. Dinner eaten in front of a screen, scrolling instead of talking, with no fire, and no one telling a story out loud. Somewhere between the Kalahari and your kitchen table, time quietly stopped being yours to spend and became something spent on you instead. This isn't an argument to abandon modern life entirely. You have medicine your ancestors would have begged for. You have protection against sudden random death that no hunter-gatherer band could ever guarantee its members. Infant mortality alone would have devastated most families you know. But something real got lost in that trade. The long, unstructured hours. The nightly stories that turned strangers into kin. A 15-hour work week that once counted as an entire, complete life, with nothing missing from it. Your ancestors didn't have less than you. In the ways that may matter most for how a life actually feels while you're living it, they may have had considerably more. You wake up when your body is ready, or at least, you used to. No alarm, no schedule, no place you needed to be. For 99% of human history, that wasn't a hypothetical. It was simply what it meant to be human.